Hello and welcome to the Wilderness Wonders podcast. Today's episode is pretty special and unique. I had the chance to sit down and chat with Ben Woodruff and John Griggs. Now, Ben has an awesome podcast going on right now and an awesome YouTube channel, and he has these really cool conversations with John. Both of these guys have been in falconry for quite some time now, and they're excellent educators. So it was such a wonderful opportunity to be able to sit down and talk with them about a somewhat controversial subject of car hawking. Now, when we recorded this, I was a guest on his podcast, but Ben has graciously allowed me to upload it to our podcast as well, so you guys are able to listen and find it here. If you guys are interested in seeing more of Ben Woodruff's stuff, make sure you go check out his YouTube channel. It's just his name, Ben Woodruff. He's pretty easy to find, and he's got all sorts of falconry and wildlife content. Thank you guys so much. Now let's get to it and enjoy.
Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here with another episode of the Falconry Podcast. A few weeks ago, John Griggs, Jason Norman, and myself sat down to have a little discussion of the controversial topic of car hawking. In doing so, between the three of us at separate remote locations using different software and some new hardware, we ran into a couple of glitches here and there. When I went to edit it, I found that we had some areas here and there where there were unintentional interruptions that we couldn't hear the other person, didn't realize we were doing so, and things of that nature. We haven't had a chance to try to fix that through re-recording, and in post-production I wasn't able to fix it just simply with editing. So I wanted to give you a heads up at the front of this podcast so you're aware of those. I appreciate your patience and understanding with those limitations. We'll get it fixed for all the future podcasts, and hope you enjoy this episode of the Falconry Podcast, and as always, happy hawking. You're listening to the Falconry Podcast with Ben Woodruff. Hello everybody, it's Ben Woodruff here with the Falconry Podcast. I'm here today with a couple of friends, John Griggs and Jason Norman. We are having a good conversation and an interesting topic, but first, John, Jason, why don't you guys introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your channels?
I'm John, and I run a channel called Falcon's Ledge, and this channel I review flight sims and space sim hardware. I do a bit of flight videos, but I also occasionally post falconry hunting videos. If you like aviation or flight or space sims, come check it out. Link will be in the video description. If you're interested in my falconry videos, I also do a vlog sort of thing on TikTok under the same name.
Cool. Thank you, John.
Awesome. I'm Jason Norman, and my channels that I'm Jason, and the channels that I have is Wilderness Wonders. I do have a YouTube and TikTok, so if you guys are interested in falconry videos, we are slowly expanding more to wildlife in general as well. So if you are interested in that, again, Wilderness Wonders on YouTube and TikTok.
Cool. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, John. And again, if you don't remember their names of their channels and sites, be sure to look down below in the description, and we will have links directly to those. So, before we jump into our topic, we just want to give a couple of quick updates where we're at this year on our current projects. Me personally, I've been training a new Lanner Falcon, and I finally gave him a name. He's Egyptian, so I had to give him an Egyptian name, and I ended up going with Khufu, which is an Egyptian pharaoh, a great pyramid builder. And he's doing really well. He's slow, but he's steady. He's learning quickly, and he's been a joy to work with. So he's him, along with I've also been training a rehab golden eagle that I'm prepping to go in the wild, hopefully in October. Hopefully he'll be ready to hunt enough to prove himself and go back into the wild. So those are my two big projects right now.
Ben likes the name Khufu because he likes to say Khufu.
Khufu.
Yeah.
Khufu. Khufu.
It's an Egyptian
Where have I
name.
heard that name before?
It
It seems so familiar.
yeah, he's a very, very, very famous pharaoh. Which I don't like all the early stuff. I'm an 18th dynasty man. That's right smack dab in the middle of Egyptian history is where I'm at. But I'm like, you know what? I like 2-syllable names for my birds if I can get away with it. And Khufu, I'll say Khufu, but it's
we won't
Khufu.
hold you to the proper translation.
But yeah, he was a great.
Pronunciation. That's the word. Sorry,
It's just like Americans saying Tooth&Talon when it's Tutankhamun.
Yeah.
Well, nobody says that.
Well,
So.
I have a sharp-shinned hawk that we took as an IS this year, and he got sick. He got coccidiosis about 20 days ago. It was about that. He's gone through full treatment and is fully recovered. He's doing great. Just started training with him again and had an interesting occurrence yesterday. I almost, you could say, I almost traded up or down, depends on your point of reference. So I took the bird out to do a little bit of training. See, because we took this bird as a baby, in the wild, its parents would have been bringing in hampered prey. Sometimes very hampered, sometimes not very hampered, where they would release it and the young would actually chase it. The ISs, their branchers, would actually chase it. And so we do something kind of similar because you have to teach that lesson. You have to establish the prey picture. You have to show them where their food comes from. Because if you want to hunt with a bird, especially accipiters, if they think food comes from your hand and that's the origin of food, you're going to have a bad day. It's not going to be a good experience for you. They're going to be really aggressive about your hands. And that's a bad thing. So it's really important to establish that prey picture. Yeah. So I'm out there with a sparrow tied to a string that is a little ways away from me, and I let my bird go, and he decided he was going to kill that flower down on the ground next to it. And and then shortly after, the flower next to it had to go. Eventually, though, he took off up into the air, saw the sparrow again, came down and slammed down. It was great. He did his job. So one of the things that I've been working on with him is trading him. So that's oftentimes a tactic that we use one more way of just kind of controlling the situation and being able to handle the bird without any bad behaviors. So what happens is that once they've dispatched their prey and they've plucked part of it, then we come in and usually cover the prey or hold on to it in some way. And then we throw out pre-prepared food for the bird. And the thing is, they actually like that. That's why they go for the pre-prepared food, is because it's easier to eat than trying to tear apart an entire body of a sparrow, right? So he switched over to it. Great. Yeah. The transfer went well, which made me happy because we hadn't practiced very much with sparrows, just other pieces of meat or whatever. So I sit down right next to him. He is 6 inches on my right side. I can literally reach out and touch his back. And what I'm doing is just kind of transferring him, throwing out another piece of meat, and he'll go to that piece of meat, toss out another one, he goes to that piece of meat, just feeding him up the rest of his meal for the day. And while he was sitting out plucking, my head was on a swivel. I was looking everywhere because sharpshins are prey. They're predators, but they are most definitely prey. And that applies to all micros, even up to male Cooper's hawks. Whether it's a red tail, whether it's a female Cooper's or a goshawk or whatever, don't think it can't happen to you, because it can.
They're not the top of the food chain.
No, not at all. And I have to admit, I did not pay this much attention when I was flying kestrels for so many years, and how many times I had a kestrel on game where it took me a few minutes to get to it. A friend of ours lost a bird recently to a Cooper's. And so I've had my head on a swivel. After I did the switch, I sat down next to the bird, 6 inches away from me, and I'm not paying as much attention, but I still am looking around, right? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, bird's pretty safe. He's right next to a gigantic human. But I go down to put the last piece of meat on the ground and caught some movement out of the corner of my eye. My head was turned towards the bird. Coming from straight in front of me, it was a female Cooper's hawk coming in to kill my bird. So I reached out and grabbed the Cooper's hawk in midair.
Crazy. Crazy.
I was reaching from the top down, okay? So I grabbed it right around the waist. And I couldn't keep a hold of it because I don't know. It's
it's already going downward.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
There wasn't anything solid for me to push against, right? It was just midair, but I did get a hold of it, and it ricocheted off the ground past my bird and then took off.
Oh, it's crazy.
I mean, if I hadn't have come in contact with it, it would have hit the bird, and then I would have caught it. You know, I would have grabbed a hold of it. It was 6 inches from me.
Was it first year?
Yeah,
Passage bird.
passage bird.
Yeah. So it's probably hitting that those hunger pains. It's just like, hey, I'm having to learn how to hunt for the first time and really figuring things out. It's a drought year, hard to find food. Hey, there's something fluttering there. I'll go after that.
But it's interesting,
terrifying.
That those moments of adrenaline, right? That I still, right now, I mean, this was yesterday. I still remember the feel of her hips under my hands. Like, because it was so vivid, because it was a huge adrenaline rush, because my heart was pounding, because I don't know, just the whole situation with, you know, our friend losing his bird in the same kind of way, and I couldn't believe what I had just seen or experienced, because I think all of us have probably seen, you know, I've obviously seen Cooper's hawks watching my bird when I'm training in the front yard or whatever. I just never expected one to come down when I was present.
Yeah, but that's emotional whiplash to go from your sharp shin going like, I'm not going to go after that sparrow. I'm going to catch flowers instead. La, 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 la. To a Cooper's hawk trying to take it out. That is terrifying.
Oh, it was. And like I said, you know, if it would have got my bird, you know, my bird probably would have been toast. It was a big female Cooper's. That can cause a lot of damage right away. But, you know, I would have had a Cooper's, I guess.
I'm glad I don't have to deal with that. At least not yet.
Yeah. Trying to look at the positives of this. But, well, the positives are it didn't end in a negative way. My bird didn't get hit. I don't even think he saw the thing coming. In fact, he turned around and screamed at me because I put my hand near him when he was eating. And I'm like, come on. Oh, by the way, I named my bird Timo. Timo. He's a character from League of Legends who is a little and a pain in the ass, so it kind of fits. But I'm like, Timo, you realize I just saved your bacon, name. Right?
Well, thank you for the update. Glad that Timo made it okay. And Jason, what are you up to currently?
So I am on my third season now, and nice. my first 2 seasons I did a red-tailed hawk on rabbits, and we're not changing things too much for the moment, but we are flying a Harris's hawk right now.
Sweet.
My Harris's hawk, she was born. Well, she hatched early spring. So she was a bit of an early bird, and we've been hunting jackrabbits. The cottontail season just barely opened up. We haven't really gone after cottontails just yet, because we've only seen jackrabbits in our area for the most part. But she's caught 2 rabbits so far, and she's doing pretty well.
Sweet.
And I don't know, things are going pretty smooth. It's a little bit slower progress than starting with like a fresh Harris's hawk out of the chamber.
Yeah.
Versus a passage redtail. I feel like a passage redtail knows what they're doing, but then a Harris's, you kind of got to teach them from the ground up, and then I'm sure the next step is imprinting, where you're really teaching them from the very start. So it's really cool to see the different flight styles, and so far I think I'm preferring the red tail flight style.
Really?
But I really am enjoying this Harris's hawk and her personality and her more willingness to stick close. We even tried car hawking pigeons a little bit with not very much success. But what we did have success with pigeons is we're in Utah, and I would go along the Jordan River, and there's bridges over the Jordan River, and pigeons hang out under those.
Yeah.
And so we would corner the pigeons between like the bridge wall and the path, and then the moment the pigeon would try to fly off, my bird would cut it off and catch it. And so we caught 3 pigeons that way, but it was a little bit boring because the flight was maybe 6-7 feet, and then caught the pigeon, yay, and so then I was like, this is cool, but rabbits was way more thrilling. So even though we're having the horrible rabbit hemorrhage disease at the moment, we still have had a lot more fun hunting rabbits. And She's been an excellent bird so far, working well with my dog and everything like that. So
nice.
It's been a lot of fun working with her so far.
That's awesome.
That is great news, and sometimes those shorter flights too that aren't as exciting for us are still good confidence boosters for the bird. And
absolutely,
yeah, they just probably my most embarrassing one like that. This came to my mind because of the bridge story. The inlet park down where Utah Lake turns into the Jordan River. I was there one time. I had this tiny male golden eagle named Rage, and we walked across the bridge and we're looking, and the water's half frozen. I'm like, are there any ducks we can go after? Can we try to? And all of a sudden, these two ducks came flying under the bridge, and they just looked up and they both they're like, see humans and then eagle, and they're like, ah! And one of them doing hit its head on the bridge, fell in the water, and the eagle jumped off straight down 13 feet, just caught this stunned duck in the water, and is like, I got it! And I'm like, oh, you idiot. I'm like, great, good, okay, congratulations. Yes, you caught it. But I'm like, it was just such an odd thing. But those things.
Yeah, but then it'll boost his confidence.
Exactly. Especially where I went in the water after it. It's like, hey, it's worth pursuing into difficult terrain or even into the water because look, there was a big reward. So yeah, those are the.
And we will be doing ducks. We're just kind of waiting for that season to open too.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll be doing canal ducks.
That's the way to go.
They're a little bit easier. You can run into them a little bit more consistently.
Yeah. And it kind of forces
a lot
them to make a
lot of the
choice.
canals you can also drive alongside.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you see them and you want to, either you can car hawk canal ducks in a lot of places here if you really want.
Mm-hmm.
But there are plenty of opportunities where you can get out of your car and then go and try to get the ducks. And currently I'm trying to train my dog. My dog is a lab English pointer mix.
Mm.
And she's good at finding rabbits. She sucks at pointing. I can't get her to point. That might be more of a failure part of me. I'm not 100% sure because I haven't trained, very many dogs. And I'm training her to flush ducks, and she's having a good time with that. Getting in the water. When I first got her, she kind of had a fear of water. And over the year, we've been kind of slowly working up her confidence as well to try to hop in the water, enjoy the water, and try to flush ducks so that when my hawk goes after them, the ducks aren't just ducking under the water.
Yep.
They're actually going to fly.
Yeah.
So that's been fun training my dog to do that. And I have to be a little cautious because I'm like, I hope people aren't thinking I'm just trying to harass the ducks for fun. Because we're not trying to catch them or anything, but
it's weird because where hunting is, if you're legally hunting, whether it's, gun hunting or with a bird or whatever, and you got your proper permits, that it's like, okay, it's illegal to harass or bother a duck in Utah. But, I had a sheriff one time being like, what are you doing? Because I was throwing rocks in the water to try to flush ducks out of a canal forward so that my hawk could go after him. And he's like, what are you doing? That's illegal. I could arrest you for that. And it was apparently he lived near there. He wasn't even on duty. You're harassing ducks. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm trying to kill them. What? I've got a hawk here, and here are my permits, and here is my waterfowl stamp. And he's like, whoa, okay, but just don't bother them. I'm like, it's like, okay, dude, because he's used to bizarre. Kids just chucking rocks, but yeah.
Well, what's so interesting about the ducks is the ducks are so
being
used to
disemboweled by an eagle. That's not a bother.
Literally standing over them, so at times,
yeah.
And sometimes they're not even scared of my dog, and so it's like.
Because they know
to train her. Well, a lot of these ducks that I tried training on her first are already used to seeing dogs on leashes.
Oh, gotcha.
And so they had no fear, and so my dog could run up and run them over if if I'm not careful. And so I was like, all right, let's go find ducks that aren't used to people so that they run away.
Yeah.
And so that's when we started going more along the Jordan River and a few canals, where they're a little bit more away from people, and those ducks reacted perfectly. And so that way they weren't getting hurt, and the ducks were just flying off, and I could come back the next week, same ducks would be in the same spot.
Yep.
So they weren't really too freaked out, so they stayed there.
Well, that's part of the thing too. Is like in nature, it's kind of like the lion and the zebra principle. Zebras are running away from a lion, then the second one zebra goes down, they're like, oh, okay, well that's terrible, but we can continue grazing because the lions are eating. And it's the same thing. It's survival, but once you know somebody else has been taken down, it's like, it doesn't happen with gun hunting. If you gun hunted a pond, all the ducks are gone the rest of the day. But if if a peregrine catches a duck, goshawk, whatever, and they're like, oh, they'll return, and they're like, oh, okay, that's nature. So it's just interesting.
A lot of them will kind of think, I think too, is the ducks will be like, oh, well, we all got away when we hung out in this spot.
Yeah.
Success.
Oh, that's a good way to
hang out in this spot again, and a predator comes by again, we've got a good chance to escape because we already know the drill.
That makes sense.
So,
that's a good point.
And I'm thinking that might be part of it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm giving them
as long as you're faster than Bill.
Thought, but it
could be
just since they know the area, they're comfortable in it, and they've had success getting away from prey in that area before, so they return to it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. That's a theory.
Well, I'm excited for you. You're gonna have a head start on me on the canal ducks. Last year, it's kind of embarrassing, but I'll admit it now. Here in Utah, not only was all the 2020 scare stuff going on, everybody's freaked out, pandemic, toilet paper, but we had those earthquakes. And
I remember that.
And I genuinely was like, okay, are people going to freak out? Is society going to collapse? If so, maybe. And so I I reverse molted my goss and my peregrine because I'm like, those are the two best birds in my mind to try to actually, in a survival situation, get food if society collapses. So now they're way behind. So they're like about a month behind now in their molts. I'm like, geez, I don't think the goss is going to be ready for the duck hunt. So you're going to have to clear out those canals and tear it up for us because I'm excited because canal hawking is, I just love it. I think it's a really active type of flight style that's a bit different than just open waterways that I just love.
We'll see. We'll be covering a lot of the canals along the west side of the valley. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, Joseph Carter actually has private access to a lot of them, and so
cool.
I'm hoping to hitch rides with him. And
that's a smart way to do it.
And he's excited, and I'm excited to do that too. Which we need to get him on the podcast.
Yeah, we do. We do.
I have already talked to him about it, so he'll be joining us.
He said he's willing to. Yeah, we just it's just still getting it up, man. It's just keeping busy. It's like anytime I'm making videos, I just crank out a whole bunch of them and then I just schedule them out so that I hopefully have stuff up and then I get busy and don't do it. And John's always like, we need to do this. We need to do these podcasts. And I'm like, I just get busy. I get busy. Or get in car accidents, one of the two, right?
Yeah, you've got a thing for those.
Yeah, it seems like, past 4 years. Bam, get another one. So, but let's jump into our main topic. We're talking about a topic that we have a lot of thoughts, pros and cons. We all have a lot of experience on this topic, but and that is the subject of car hawking. And specifically, we're bringing this up. Dun dun dun! Indeed. Like, they said it. They said it out loud. We've talked about bringing up this subject for a while now and just going over it. But all three of us are like, hey, you know what? Let's bring it up this time because there's a video that went out that caused a lot of buzz, a lot of negative and positive feedback, a lot of thoughts. So, Jason, do you want to kind of walk us through what this video is and what happened in it? And then we'll talk about it as well as car hawking in general.
Yeah, sure. So this video that had been circling around, I would say it went viral for sure. A few friends of mine tagged me in the comments to have me check it out, and it's of a guy car hawking with a Harris's hawk. And this video was on TikTok. It ended up growing to have over 20 million views. So a lot of people saw it, huge exposure. And I think one of the reasons why it got that is because it was kind of shock value. Mm-hmm. So to describe the video, it's put with a song, but I think it's taken it was videoed. Well, sorry. I think this was done in the UK. And I don't know exactly what area or country, but what this person is doing is they're throwing their Harris's hawk out the window and it's catching crows. Mm-hmm. And they're doing it in several different locations. Some of it looks like it's near a park with children playing at the playground. Another looks like it's in a neighborhood. Another does look like it's more of in an empty field. And some things to mention, it really does look like he's, shoving the hawk out the window instead of waiting for the hawk to go on
with two hands, no doubt. I mean,
with two hands pushing the hawk out the window there. And here and I think the reaction to it from the general public was like, oh my gosh, a drive-by with a hawk? Like, a lot of people were like, man, this man be committing crimes with hawks. Like, forget guns, we're gonna do drive-bys with hawks. And a lot of silly responses like that. For the most part, it had a positive response, but when presented to the falconry community, it was almost the exact opposite. I think John saw a lot of the comments that were spread around on Facebook or other sources that were expressing their concerns about it.
Mm-hmm. So I saw it on Falconry Hub, and also it's been passed around in a lot of places. But also I watched the video on TikTok when it came out and read a bunch of the responses.
Yeah. And there were a couple articles put out too that were presented it in a very negative fashion.
Let's be honest, so they were hit pieces. I mean,
so he's showing these highlights, and it seemed like the response was, wow, this is so much of an advantage. Like these birds don't have a chance, but I don't think a lot of them really realize is that this person posting the video are just showing the highlights. He's not showing the ones that get away.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of what I do when I make videos is I show a lot of the mostly highlights.
Oh, yeah.
Like the good flights and
who wants to watch it, an hour of misses?
Yeah,
here's me walking through sagebrush for an hour, not flushing anything out.
I skip a lot. Like my 2 to 3 hour hunts end up being 10-minute videos. So, you kind of show the highlights, and that's what this person's doing. And TikTok is catered towards really short videos, and so you only have 15 seconds, maybe a minute to really get a point across that you want to get. And if you just want to show highlights, you're just going to show highlights, to really get people to view your content.
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of me thinking as a content creator.
That's everywhere though. I mean, you look at YouTube, you are not going to see a video with 300 misses or something like that. You're not even going to see a long wing video where the bird comes down and there's 10 different instances and they misses all but one. You're not going to see that. It's not going to happen. People aren't going to watch it.
Yeah.
So, and when I had the chance to go watch Steve Gingren's birds fly, and his birds have as high or maybe even a higher success rate than this person does at car hawking. So I struggle to see people saying this is unfair when there's plenty of other ways people hawk that are unfair, but they consider it the right way. So I thought the response was really confusing and
well,
a little bit misplaced, but
yeah.
Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here.
No, you're right. And one of the big things, like, first of all, we've got to acknowledge the fact that in general, society in most countries, certainly in America, is becoming more and more distant from a connection with their food. Meat and plants are abstract objects 100%. That just show up at the grocery store. And so Americans are among, if not the worst, in my opinion, in this way. Even your dog food. It's like, oh, what is dog food? Oh, I would never harm an animal. Do you have a dog? Yes, and I love it. What do you feed it? Dog food. Do you read the ingredients list? Chicken, pork, beef, fish, rabbit, all ground up, as well as plants, ground up, cooked into a star-shaped nugget. It's like, you're not feeding it star-shaped nuggets, you're feeding it dead animals. It's like, well, I just thought it was dog food. That's because you're uninformed. I would say an idiot, but that sounds a little cruel, but it's just, you're uninformed. You don't know. And society has pushed you that way. And so when we first talk about like the whole idea of, oh, it's unsporting, that's a point to be made. But here's the thing. Not only is any form of hunting, especially with birds, trying to give the animal some sort of advantage, but the birds themselves in the wild, without humans existing, do the same thing. I mean, how many Cooper's hawks sit hanging around in a tree, hiding right next to a bird feeder? It's like, that's the equivalency.
I got a story for you about that.
Yeah?
Yeah, so you said a Cooper's hawk waiting right next to a bird feeder.
Mm-hmm.
Right outside, I'm sitting here, I have a window right next to me. And last summer, I put out a bird feeder right outside the door outside the window because I wanted to see just, the local birds that come by. Well, a Cooper's hawk started hanging out up on the fence and waiting for those birds to come by. And sometimes he'd be up on the house.
Yeah.
So he'd be up on the house and would kind of sit there and watch these birds. Mm-hmm. And I'm working at my computer, and all of a sudden I hear a tonk, and then the Cooper's hawk comes down to a bird that was stunned on the ground, and picks it up and carries it off.
So it's like one.
And I'm like, what just happened? And so a few days later, I'm sitting there again, same thing that happened. Tonk. Stunned bird on the ground, Cooper's hawk comes down and get it. This Cooper's hawk had learned that if he swoops down, scares the birds, one of them is likely to hit my window and stun itself. And then it would just take the stunned bird away.
Uh-huh.
Not quite the reptilian brain that many accuse the accipiters of having.
Yeah.
Like he figured out a way to do it without even catching them.
Yeah.
He didn't have to, he could just make it so easy, just spook them enough to have one stun itself. So easy for him to do.
So it saw the patterns, and it saw in an environment what could happen. I mean, let's be honest, that's in a way, not exactly the same, but like bears congregate during the salmon spawning. And they pick out the best spots. They go to the same spots right where they know the salmon are going to go, and they just eat them. And people are like, oh, look at the bears. They're so clever. Nobody's like, they're unsportsmanlike. That's what they should go in open rivers and swim after them. That should be more sporting. Okay. It's like nobody says that. So we don't seem to have a problem with it when wild animals take advantage of opportunities like this. It's when suddenly
even less natural opportunities.
Yeah. But when humans are involved, then suddenly we do. So I think about like medieval falconers on their horse, going on horseback, and it's like, okay, I'm riding up and I'm chasing after and I'm getting close to these rabbits and I've got a height advantage, which is again no different than like what if you're walking around with your hawks on a tall T-perch so they can see far above the sagebrush.
The horses, they are more of an advantage than just a height advantage. Harry McElroy writes about this in his book, Desert Hawking 2, or 4. I don't remember which one I have. It's about quail. So he talks about the fact that from horseback, the quail will flush much closer to you than they will if you're on foot, because they don't, and this is his assumption, and I think that he's correct, in that the quail don't hear the horse's hooves rather than the cadence of a human walking.
Yeah, it's the gait of a herbivore.
They aren't as threatened about that. And furthermore, in terms of advantage, I think that falconry in general is always about giving your bird advantage. And particularly with micros, I think that the advantage of a little bit of surprise is a good thing. And I think out of all of us, I think I've probably done the most car hawking. The majority of my kills are through car hawking, but I have some physical problems that keep me from really doing a lot of walking fields.
And I've only dabbled in it just a little.
Yeah.
So you were talking about how the car hawking that you've done has been kind of boring because they're really short flights and everything.
Well,
and that's usually how it starts.
Yeah, we didn't have any success car hawking.
Yeah.
We tried, but my bird just wasn't picking it up as quickly as I hoped. and I'm like, I really want to get her on some game and really catching stuff. We'll work on the car hawking later.
It tends to be a bit of an evolution. So as you start to become successful, and some people just stop at this point where they become successful and their bird knows exactly how to do this type of flush, and most of the time when all of the factors are in position, they've got a pretty high chance of catching it, right? But then there's the people who actually want to have more of an interesting flight, and I've mentioned this person on my YouTube channel, but he's the Art of Taxidermy on YouTube, and he's got some sharp shin videos, and I've chatted with him a little bit, but as you progress in car hawking, you start to let your bird go earlier and earlier and earlier. And so you start to see a much, much longer approach and a much longer tail chase. And the only thing you're giving them is a little bit of a surprise. You know, okay, so maybe you've given them a 15-mile-an-hour boost or something like that. Believe me, my sharp-shinned hawk can do that 15-mile-an-hour thing in 6 feet.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter. It's really kind of irrelevant in that regard. So
if you were to compare it, like let's do the exact same setup, and let's say maybe by a ditch there's, I don't know, fill in the blank. Let's say there's some doves there, and you're driving and you see them ahead and you launch them, 50 yards out the window. What if you were sneaking up closer? What if you were 20 yards on foot behind some grass and you happen to know the doves were there and you popped up, and the flight is going to be almost identical with an experienced
at that
bird.
point, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and my current hawk and we would sneak up until we were almost 10 feet or less.
Yeah.
And then we'd toss a pigeon. And now it's not in a car, but we were getting pretty darn close to these pigeons.
Yeah.
So distance, I guess if you really want a great flight, you could put distance into the equation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you both this question, okay? When we're talking about advantage, and I think that from a falconry standpoint, I think that this is the biggest complaint that you hear about it. And this is a point in which I will be straight up front with you, I completely disagree with, okay? I think that a lot of falconers get it into their head is, well, they're hawking in this method here that I don't really like, so we should make it illegal. And falconers become their worst enemy in that regard. So here, let me pose this question to you. What kind of advantage does a bird have when you have a big falcon and you have a prey-rich area, you have dogs to find the prey, and basically pin the prey down until flush time, right?
Yeah.
Because the prey is less likely to run when there's a dog, because the dog can pursue them on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a bird trained by $1,000 drone to go up, or whatever, $1,000 kite kit or $1,000 balloon kit. They're all something around that range when you take into account the helium cost and all that stuff. Anyway.
Oh my gosh, helium. Yeah.
It's expensive. So
it's pricey.
You've got a bird trained to do all of these things, right? And I know that there's also other methods using pigeons and stuff. So you can either throw that in the thing. Pigeons aren't free either if you want to do a racing homers. So you've got a bird that's trained using captive bred pigeons, using $1,000 drone, using all of these things to go up to a high altitude and wait on. You release your bird when the prey is already pinned down and it gets up to 1,000+ feet above you, and you wait until the bird is in a perfect position upwind facing you, and then you flush and your dog chases to keep that bird from going back down to the ground where your falcon comes in from above and knocks it out of the air. I'd say there's a lot of things that falconer did to gain an advantage in that situation. And not all falconers are the same, skill and success rate in that kind of a scenario, but I'm aware of a few that are quite successful and have very high success rates at this. Okay. Mm-hmm. So keep that here before you say anything. I completely support this method of hunting. I think it's fantastic, and the advances in technology that we're using to gain more advantage is wonderful, and we should do tons more of it. So what do you guys think?
Jason,
that's a lot of advantage.
You answer first. I gotta go.
Sure.
There's a cat bouncing off of one of my mews, scaring one of my owls. So I'm gonna run outside, chase it off. I'll be right back in. Talk to you in a sec.
Go get him.
So I would mostly agree. I think car hawking is an excellent way to practice falconry. I think there are some definite safety concerns when it comes to it, and that's more human safety. It's more human safety that I'm more concerned with. But you're absolutely. I think that there isn't much of a difference than having 5 dogs pin down, flush up a bird when your falcon's in the perfect position. It's giving them every single opportunity to succeed. And same thing with car hawking. I use a T-perch when I hunt, and I use a dog. Those are both advantages as well. So I think it's totally fine. One of the big concerns that I think should be considered as well is you got to make sure it's legal in your state or country. So you don't want to be breaking the law, of course.
And that's a factor.
And that's definitely a factor, whether you're deciding to do this sort of thing. But I am in full support of car hawking. You just got to do it smart.
Yeah.
Well,
Don't
here's the
be
thing.
dumb about it.
And when it comes down to like falconers who are now like, well, we should probably talk to our state and make sure that this is illegal. I think that's ridiculous because here's the thing. What are the risks of car hawking? Let's talk. We'll talk about that shortly here. One, a safety risk of, what if your hawk goes off and grabs some child in the face? Well, is it already illegal for your hawk or your dog or your cat or any of these things to go off and grab somebody by the face? Would you already be held liable for that kind of behavior? Yeah, you would. You definitely would. So we don't need a new law for that. It's already illegal to have your animal. You have to have control of your animal. And so that is just saying, hey, if you're a falconer and you're hunting like this, you need to be responsible. Because if you do things haphazardly, you're going to cause yourself some difficulties. Also, people say things like, well, you shouldn't do that while you're, in a car or whatever. Well, there are also laws about your behavior in cars, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you are doing something stupid in a car, like driving the wrong way on a road or some silly thing like that to accomplish your goal here, you're probably going to get in trouble for that.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's already laws about that. Trespassing, same thing. All of these things. So I don't think we need new laws on this. I think there's nothing wrong with people going out and doing it as long as they are not violating the law. As long as they're not doing something that is going to put others in danger. Whether it's with your vehicle or your bird. I think you have to do it responsibly.
Yeah. Well, and
we have we fly a lot of different. Well, we fly quite a few different species here that are only successful from a car. That seems like it's so common for a lot of people here in the United States to fly kestrels out of a vehicle.
Yeah,
and
I've
that's
done
the
kestrels
best because we have so many starlings, and those starlings are so dang fast that there is just no chance you're going to be able to catch starlings with a kestrel on foot.
I know it's possible.
Okay, it's possible, but the chance is extremely low.
It's not high. And what's even worse is that let's say you're an apprentice and you're flying a kestrel, right? Well, I think that there is something to be said about having success and flying your bird, trying to hunt in the fields or in pallets and stuff. This is something you can do. I have caught sparrows out of pallets. I have caught sparrows with my kestrel on foot. But the vast majority of them were from a car, and it was a lot of fun. And I know I know that people say that it's not very sporting, but I disagree with them. If you've ever seen the fight that occurs after a sparrow's got a hold of a starling,
it's like a Saker falcon on a bustard.
These things are just as big as them. They've got all the tools the kestrel's got, from a very sharp beak to very sharp claws.
And the toes and claws on a starling are longer than on a kestrel. They don't have as much of a grip, but they've got longer toes and claws.
They're mean.
Yeah, I also find it weird when people say, well, this isn't falconry, when the very definition of falconry is pursuing wild game with, or wild quarry with a bird of prey.
Mm-hmm.
Those are pretty much just the two requirements.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not falconry that you like, or maybe it's not a sort of falconry that you enjoy, but it still is falconry.
Yeah. Well, and it's people like the poetry of it, right? People like, oh, it's my wilderness experience. And that is fine. We associate them. Well, and you got to think too, again, Americans in particular, we don't have a history. We don't have a long history of falconry. Yeah. It's minuscule. Most countries do have a long history that it's associated with. In Southeast Asia, like, again, there are so many people out there that will take out sparrowhawks, Eurasian sparrowhawks, and they hunt them in town at cafes. They car hawk, they do it on foot, and they just like, hey, there's always sparrows eating at the feet of people eating in the outdoor cafes. We'll go hunt there. Because there is that rich history and that historical, association for them, that the people are like, hey, there's a falconer. Oh, cool. It caught a sparrow at our feet. We live in a country where we understand that food comes from plants and animals, not from the grocery store. And so seeing seeing a Eurasian sparrowhawk catch a sparrow at our feet while we're eating lunch at a cafe on private property is an exciting thing that happened to us, rather than, oh, it's death from above. And so I'm not saying that American falconers should be running around at cafes, but I'm just pointing out that it's considered totally normal, completely normal culturally in many Southeast Asian countries to just be hunting in the city. And again, that's not a wilderness experience, but that's stemming from cultures where falconry was about getting food, even if it's a pot full of sparrows for dinner. And so the idea is still there.
I think that it has to be mentioned that in the United States anyway, the vast majority of car hawking is done on invasive species.
Yes.
Yes.
Harmful invasive species that are destroying our native species.
Yep, and worse. So sparrows, starlings, and now the new Eurasian collared dove, which has almost completely replaced our native mourning doves. Mm-hmm. You rarely see mourning doves now. Almost all of them are collared doves. So if you ask me,
I actually
probably use some more.
I actually see quite a few mourning doves near the Jordan River, but that's it.
Yeah, and it used to be, like, 20 years ago, you would see the occasional, Eurasian collared dove here and there. And mourning doves were everywhere.
Everywhere. Now you hear the Eurasian collared dove screams all the time. I mean, right around me, I have populations of Eurasian collared doves that number in the thousands. You see pigeons them everywhere.
Pigeons are getting insane. At least where I am, the pigeons are getting really bad.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, let's hunt some pigeons.
Yeah,
but they're hard.
When it comes to taking invasive species, there's no hunting season, doesn't require a hunting license. So I really question sometimes whether or not there's any kind of, restriction on that at all. I can understand, something with a hunting season, duck, quail, or mourning dove or whatever. But when it comes to invasives, man, we could use more of them gone, if you ask me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so then, in my mind, the biggest things, like you guys already pointed out, hey, there's already laws in place for things like whether or not you're trespassing, whether or not this or that, those kind of things are already in place. We don't need new laws to accomplish that. Are you doing it in an area where it's going to be safe for the bird? Well, there's always risks. You could be 100 miles out in the middle of sagebrush country, and if you're flying without a car too close to a barbed wire fence, your bird could, are you flying too close to telephone poles? So the car factor, the safety is a factor, but it's certainly not the only one. You always have to worry about safety. Are you flying are you flying in eagle country with a falcon? We know a falconer who flies, he puts his falcons up before the sun has fully come up to try to avoid eagles. It's like, okay, I mean, so there's always risks, But for me, the ethics is not about whether or not it's sporting. I think that argument at first sounds good. It sounds right. You're like, oh, that's not sporting. But when you dissect it, it's a stupid thing. It's kind of like in Utah, we can't hunt big game with a crossbow because it's considered unsporting. I'm like, okay, you can shoot with a modern centerfire rifle. That's a lot easier than a crossbow. You can hunt with a compound bow with sights that is way more accurate than any crossbow.
And easier to fire,
Way
and
easier
easier
to
to
fire.
reload, and easier to handle.
Yeah.
It's
But there's this
better in
idea.
every way.
It seems
basic
like a
crossbow.
crossbow is a cross between a bow and a gun. It really isn't. Just because it has a stock that looks gun-like, it's really not gun-like at all. It's a less accurate bow. But it's like, it seems unsporting. And car hawking seems unsporting. But one of the things that I worry perhaps too much is, even if you're following the laws, is public perception. And that is why forever I did not make any falconry videos, because I was overly worried that any time you as one falconer encounter something just like this person did on this video, you can go viral in a bad way and represent what with people who want to rip on falconry. They will take something, maybe even out of context, and make falconry look bad. So I haven't done car hawking for many years, but I'm in favor of it if it's done right, especially with micros, especially if you're getting a bird up and running. But my thoughts are that if you're doing it right, then part of that has to be, are you factoring in being wise about how this may look? Now, your person can be like, I'm being legal, I'm doing nothing legally wrong, but I think it is good to be an ambassador. And so, maybe going downtown in some big city is the wrong way to do it, where if you're patrolling farmlands in a rural area or, kind of an area that's, people are more okay with it. But, I don't know if you guys have, but I've certainly had when I've been out in the field, not car hawking, and still had people come and get in my face. That's wrong. You should set that bird free. Okay. I throw it up in the air. Huh, see? And then I call it back. Huh, why is it coming back? Because it's trained to do so.
Yeah, I've had that too.
It's like you're always going to have people getting in your face.
I get occasional comments of people getting angry at me hunting rabbits, and it's sorry guys, rabbits are at the bottom of the food chain. They're gonna be getting eaten by a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
And especially the jackrabbits here, they're invasive, so we're encouraged to actually hunt as many of those as possible.
Yeah.
Here's a thought about that, we want. But one question I wanted to ask real quick after your point, John.
Yeah. So there's a thought about that specifically, your comment, Ben, about perception, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is actually a thing that falconers have been taking the wrong approach on all along. And that is, there's a belief in the falconry community that this all should be done in the dark, that the only time that people should ever be exposed to falconry is when they're seeing a wilderness show or something like that. I disagree. Mm-hmm. I think the fact that we hide and that we don't show people, that we don't give them opportunities to talk to us, you have no idea the number of people that I've been approached by because my bird took a starling on, some strip of grass, and they're like, "Oh, what are you doing? What is that?" And I was like, "Oh, this is my kestrel," and I go over the whole thing. I go over all of the things that are involved with it. Talk to them about the legality of falconry because they oftentimes have questions, and that it's an ancient sport and how the bird was acquired, and how we take care of them, and the care and dedication that we show towards these birds. And oftentimes when they're wild caught, they get released back into the wild. And the thing about it is that most of the time, the vast majority of the time, I would say 95% of the time,
I'd say it's higher than that.
Yeah, probably. But I just
at least for me,
benefit of the doubt here, or the thing. They come out of it with a more positive opinion of falconry than they came into it with, at least more educated. I think I've probably only had 2 people that have been like, you really, I don't want you ever to come around here anymore. Don't ever come. You remember the one woman who thought that she owned the quail that my bird went after.
Yeah.
Ben, and screamed and yelled at us how we're killing her quail. We've never killed one of your quail before. My bird was supposed to go after the starlings, but it went after one of the adult quail and didn't know what it was getting itself into. Mm-hmm. Kestrel, she never did hold on to a quail. Then again, I didn't really intentionally hunt them.
Yeah.
They just eat the same things that the starlings do. But yeah, I think why is it that
I think you're right.
All of the people, they always say, we should hide from people and not show what we do. No, we should show what we do.
But I think it's important to be diplomatic about it.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Which is great if we're sharing media and things like that. I think we need to provide a certain level of education. Mm-hmm. And I've felt like I've missed the mark at that at times as well. And so I feel like I've tried upping the quality or upping the education in my videos in a general sense, and it's really, really helped the response. And instead of just throwing out videos here and there, and sometimes I do, and I'm like, maybe remove it, and then I'll put it back up, doing it a little better. And with apps like TikTok, with YouTube, you have all the time in the world to explain yourself, talk, educate. I mean, we're talking for nearly an hour here.
Yeah.
And
TikTok,
explaining
you got
ourselves. Where TikToks, you got 1 minute at the most. Well, actually, I think they just released 3-minute videos now, but nobody's really doing more than a minute. And so most videos are like 15 seconds. So it's like, how can you get that point across? Mm-hmm. And still educate at the same time. And it can be difficult. It really can. But that's kind of what we need to be doing as falconers. If we want to be creating content, I think we should be providing education, like how John was saying. He goes through the whole spiel. We can go through different parts of the spiel in our short videos, talk about hunting. If we say, it just takes a little word change.
Yeah.
Hunting starlings with a kestrel, you can just put hunting invasive starlings with a kestrel, mm-hmm. and it changes the perception of it a lot.
Yeah.
Through my media so far, I have noticed it's a 99% like positive. Like out of every 100 comments I get, I maybe get like 1, maybe 2 negative comments. And mm-hmm. It's not very often I reach over 100 comments on a video. It's pretty rare. So it is overwhelmingly accepted, and I think falconers, we tend to focus so much on the negative.
Yeah.
And it's kind of human nature, and falconers think that if one person says it negative, that means everybody else must be the same. And they ignore all the positive and good comments or positive and good responses to it, I guess. And so there is a lot more people in support of falconry than we really think.
Yeah.
And getting people educated on the sport, telling people how this benefits the birds, and how it's an ancient relationship, can actually defend the sport for future generations. Mm-hmm. Whether or not the public is playing, or whether or not the public is a part of the sport. If they know about it and know that it does a good thing, they're going to support it in the future. Mm-hmm. So
speaking of the future, and my final thoughts on car hawking anyway.
I still have that question. I totally forgot.
Yeah.
Well, remember it for right now.
Okay, I'll remember it.
I think car hawking is a piece of the future of falconry, and the reason that I think that is that a lot of our wild places are going away. A lot of our places to hunt are going away, or getting smaller and smaller, and more restrictions. So inevitably, if we want to have a new generation of falconers, they're going to have to hawk in an urban environment.
Mm-hmm.
So there are only a few ways to hawk in an urban environment, and one of the most effective ways is through the act of car hawking.
Mm-hmm.
And if falconers don't embrace this sort of thing and embrace some of the alternate forms of falconry, especially some of the ones that maybe are urban in nature, then we could be looking at the slow death of our sport that we love.
Mm.
And we've been seeing this slowly occurring over time. But, even just... So Ben and I have been friends for almost 20 years now, right?
Yeah.
We used to trap in places that are now covered in houses. We used to trap where Jason lives right now.
Mm.
People used to hunt where I live right now.
Yeah.
We used to hunt where you live.
Steve used to hunt sage grouse right here.
Yeah, I can't speak to that far back, but, we're only going back to the year 2000.
Yeah.
The year 2000 is 21 years ago now. So, yeah, I remember trapping in Eagle Mountain, and I remember we were trapping prairies and things like that out there. So
yeah, there was nothing in Cedar Valley, and now it's just everything
nothing.
that's getting gobbled up. So it really is true that if you want to, you have to think outside of the box. I respect the old ways and try to keep a lot of them alive. And that's why large, long wings, it seems nobody wants to fly them anymore, all the younger people, and that's fine. It's
really hard.
But it's getting harder and harder, and that's why, I think lanners, for example, are one of the ways to fly a larger long wing in a less rural environment. But that is a good point about car hawking, that is one avenue through which people can hunt in a more urban setting. But again, for me, one of my guiding principles, again, is always thinking it through, just being wise about it, being diplomatic in your thinking and saying, okay, am I likely to make a mistake doing it here? Or is this an area that's a good area for the bird, for me, for public perception? So it just takes thinking.
That kind of brings me to my question regarding the original video. How would you have done it differently? How would you be car hawking differently than this individual?
Good point.
Well,
here, do you want me to show you the video? I can just screen share it for you real quick.
Well, we're only recording the audio, so...
Yeah.
I know, but so that you guys can see.
Yeah.
I just go live real quick, and it's playing. So how would you be car hawking differently than this person who had the super viral video?
Well, one thing that I can tell you right away is that I started car hawking back in 2002, and there wasn't a ton of people doing it. So there was a lot of different ways that I experimented with it, and Ben gave me a bunch of suggestions. Hey, why don't you try something like this? This might be fun. So one of the ways that I did it was I dart hawked out the window, and I didn't find it to be much of an advantage. Oftentimes when I would dart hawk out the window of the car, the bird would not be prepared to go after what I threw it at. So what I've learned over time is that it's much better, and I have a much better success rate, and I think it's just better with the birds to let them go on their own volition. And I think that that's one thing that this person might have. I don't know how much I like two-hand tossing. And this is not, if this is what you like to do, I'm fine with that. It's not something I think should be illegal or anything. I just think that it looks bad. Mm-hmm. That it looks much worse than it is. The bird isn't being hurt or anything. Mm-hmm. And people always say, well, it's going from no wind to a lot of wind. They don't care. I've had birds jump out the window hundreds and hundreds of times, and they don't care. They get used to it. They know exactly what's coming. But I think that what he's trying to do is give it a little bit more advantage, and I don't think it's necessary.
Is he trying to hold the wing? Like, what I thought at first when I first saw this, I thought maybe he's holding down the wing so it doesn't hit the window.
Yeah, or a bird will tend to,
and it just looks like he's throwing because of the shakiness of the camera or the weird angle that we're seeing it at. I wonder if he's just literally trying to hold in that wing just a little bit longer so it clears the window.
Sometimes
I'm wondering.
they will bait early, like they'll see the target through the windshield, and you don't want them to see that. So
Yeah.
maybe they don't really know the art of using the A-pillar to block the game. Because that's exactly what I would always do. I always use that A-pillar to hide the game, and I put the hawk's head right in front of the A-pillar and move it so that it can't see it until I want it to see it. With my Cooper's Hawk, I couldn't do that because I swear to you, they have X-ray vision. So I actually put a piece of cardboard in front of me when I would sit in the park passenger seat, so that the Cooper's Hawk couldn't see through the front window.
Hey, it works.
Because the Coopers they're crazy. If he saw stuff out of the front window, he would go nuts trying to get to it. So what I think might be happening there is that he's keeping the bird from baiting before he's ready to serve it. But still, it's just the way that it looks to a person is a double hand, toss the bird out, right?
You're tossing the bird out almost like a football or rugby
all,
ball or something.
It's all perception. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with it. I think that if there was something you could say, this guy probably shouldn't have been doing that, is kids are present. Because...
Yeah, or at the park. Probably just a little too public, maybe a little bit too risk for the bird or for driving and doing this at the same time, and also maybe kids freaking out and seeing it, or maybe a risk of the bird grabbing a kid.
I wouldn't have even put a kestrel out at that point. It's just one of those situations where the last thing you want to do is scar somebody, and I think that if there is an ethical question to this video, it's that right there. It's throwing a bird out with children present. I know that the Harrises are not prone to going after people. However, it's not a kestrel. They are capable of doing harm. Kestrels I think are pretty safe, but I still wouldn't put one out in front of a child.
One of my biggest fears with being in public, hawking in public, is if my bird catches something and there happens to be an individual nearby that doesn't like that's happening, and they harm my bird. That happened to my sponsor. You remember Mark? His bird got shot by somebody. And when his bird was on a rabbit.
Wow.
And this was out in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
And so, would somebody come up and try to stomp or kick my bird if it was on a pigeon in public? And so I'm like, I would wait until nobody was around, and then I'd kind of go for it. And so I have a bit more of a fear that I'm going to run into the wrong person that decides to hurt my bird to try to save whatever it's catching. And I don't know if my fear is silly, but
no,
I
not
feel
at
like
all.
it's happened before.
But it falls,
not at all.
It falls
me
into
out.
that common sense, It's like, think things through. Any form of hunting, not just car hawking, but any of them. Where are you going? Who might you encounter? Both with other wildlife that you might come in contact with. I've had 2 eagles shot at, and so it's like. In areas with no gun, no shooting posted everywhere. It's like, okay, where are you going to be? Are there going to be power lines? Are there, what are you going to encounter? Are you going to encounter people who are going to be upset? You have to be wise. You have to be legal. You have to be wise, and you just have to think it through.
So, the majority of the places where I hunt are neighborhoods where I live and people that I know, so it's a little bit easier. But even if someone I know is out, I will still refuse my bird the slip. I will pull them down and keep them from even seeing it. The other things that I watch for, things like no trespassing. I don't want to get in trouble with people. I don't want a person that's got no trespassing out and they have some starlings in their front lawn or whatever. Which it isn't really illegal if someone doesn't have a no trespassing sign. For you to walk on their lawn or something like that. But I will oftentimes knock on their door and say hi and tell them what happened or something like that, especially if, they've got a camera or something like that. I want to make sure that they know exactly what's going on, and be kind to them. But I think that's the key to those things. I will even hunt in other places. I've after a winter storm, a good place to find things is at the end of the Walmart parking lot sometimes. Right? So I'm not telling you that you should do this. This is just something that I've done in the past. And if anyone is nearby, if there's a car that's driving right there or someone standing 20 feet away, I won't do it. Because the last thing that I want to have happen is my bird goes out and catches a starling, is struggling with it on the ground, and somebody else comes and injures my bird or even creates a bad situation where they're, trying to grab it or free the other bird, or because that's not a situation that's going to be good. So you have to be cognizant of what you're doing. And trust me, the idea that you can't control that situation is a farce. You can because I do it all the time.
Yeah. Well, we're over the hour. Why don't you guys both do what you want to say for just kind of a last wrap up thought?
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for having me with you guys today. I really, really appreciate being on the podcast with y'all. Hopefully we can continue and do a few more. I had a great time.
Yeah, we ought to do a red tail one.
Yes, definitely got to do a red tail one.
Yeah,
and
sure.
If you guys are interested, I do also have a podcast. It's Wilderness Wonders Podcast. You can find that on most podcast streaming apps. I do know I think it's on Spotify and on Apple and on several others. So you can find a few podcasts there. I got to interview guys like Matthew Mullenix and Steve Chingrin, and Anita Wolf. A few pretty cool people have been in the sport for a very long time and have even written some books. You can also find my personal content at Wilderness Wonders on YouTube and TikTok. So hopefully we can see you guys there.
Check them out. Everybody go over there and show them some love.
Definitely.
Don't forget to like and subscribe and
smash that subscribe button.
Smash that subscribe button.
We need you. All right, John, any last thoughts?
No, I think that when it comes to this sort of thing, it's important to keep an open mind and to understand that even though something that someone else is doing is something that you're not a big fan of, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's ethically wrong. And that falconry is all about giving our birds advantage. So saying that something isn't sporting is an opinion in most cases. But yeah, I think that this is another way to enjoy falconry, particularly with birds that are not well suited for other types of flying. Doesn't mean that it's not possible. I know there's going to be people there that say, "No, I caught 25 sparrows with my kestrel off the fist." Well, that's great. Congratulations. I didn't catch that many off the fist, but I've done well in car hawking. So, but yeah, again, check out my channel, Falcon Sledge, on YouTube. Do all the subscribe and like and stuff. That would be awesome.
All right. Well, yeah, and just to wrap it up on my end, again, I think if you're going to do car hawking, think it through, be wise, always be legal, be safe, be wise, be diplomatic, and just like Jason was saying too, you find ways to educate rather than being abrasive with people, and just like John was saying, be sure to find ways to properly share, and that it's better, rather than hiding falconry in the closet, to share it and expose people to it in a positive way. And the more we can do that, I think the better. So, but hey, we appreciate you all listening. Hope you'll catch us next time on the Falconry Podcast. And as always, happy hawking.